Welcome, everybody. We'll talk about what I think is one of the funnest things to talk about, and that is appealing, right? How are we going to go back to these colleges and get some more money in addition to whatever they offered initially? I imagine you're getting, we're talking about it right now because I think for the class 2023, this is where we're getting. These are the biggest talking points, right? Number one, help me translate this award letter. What the heck does it even mean? What am I looking at? So we'll talk about that a little bit. And then number two, how can we go back to these schools and do better than we've done initially? By way of brief introduction, my name is Matt Carpenter. We're here representing College Aid Pro. Coast's here. I'm in Salem, Mass, just north of Boston. Peggy's out there in the Pacific Northwest in the Seattle area. If you want, and again, we've started this relatively new initiative to try to support you all. We work with tons of high schools all over the country and have got a lot of feedback to say, hey, we'd love to have a resource, right? We'd love to be able to reach out with some of the questions that we feel like we either want a sounding board on when it relates to financial aid and scholarships, or it feels like it's just over our heads or whatever. And that's part of the point of having these every other week. Hopefully you're checking out the newsletters that we send every other week that has a lot of great content in there. On that note, one thing that we do in there is we have what we call featured advisors, where I do a quick interview, get to know you a little bit. You get to share your experiences, good, bad, and ugly, with your peers. That's been getting some good traction. There's actually been some kind of cool connections with folks, connecting with old colleagues saying, hey, haven't seen them forever. Glad they landed on their feet. That's been cool. And then we've also, the other thing that we found is that some advisors have come to work with us in some capacity, side hustle of sorts, whatever you want to call it, whether you're a great writer and you want to help us with content with your sweet spot, right? Admission stuff that is not necessarily our sweet spot, whether you're allowed to work with families outside of business hours. And again, just take your expertise that you do at your schools and do that outside your office hours. We get a ton of inbound requests for that stuff. And again, it's not the stuff that we are experts at. So we've teamed up with folks like yourself. So anyway, and of course, we have our traditional ways of partnering with high schools, which is to provide our financial aid curriculum, which we'll talk about, and our software, which we'll talk about. But if you want to talk to us for any reason, Peggy, you can put my any of the above. You can put my kind of scheduling link in there if any of that sounds intriguing.
Sure.
Please, let's find a time to chat. So, Peggy, if you want to say hi quickly, we'll get right into the content.
Yeah. So as Matt said, I'm Peg Keogh. I'm outside of Seattle. I'm a Jersey kid, so I'm a transplant out here, but I've been doing this work for over a decade, exclusively just this now. And this is what I live and breathe, just helping people like you and parents and advisors, all kinds of people that are trying to support families around what I affectionately call the crazy world of financial aid. So that's what I do, and delighted to support you guys. I have so much respect for what you do. I could never do it. So I'm so happy you guys are out there doing it. If we can make it a little bit easier or a lot easier, that's great for us. We're happy to be there for you.
It's a good way to put it. That's the goal. And if you're open to sharing, just pop in the chat where you all are in the country. We always like seeing that. We're pretty well diversified geographically, but if you're open to sharing, you can do it anonymously. Just tell us where you're at in the country. That's always fun to see.
Yeah. And as we present, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A versus the chat, because they'll get captured. And if you want to be anonymous, you can be anonymous. Oh, there's somebody in Bellevue. Woohoo!
Yeah.
One of my hometown girls. Yeah. But yeah, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A, and then we will address them as we go. And we might even do them out loud.
And the other thing and we'll remind you at the end here tonight too, we're going to get right now, give you a presentation on appeals, right? It'll be a little bit more condensed than we've talked to parents, with the assumption that a lot of this stuff is second nature for you guys. I think hopefully some of the more nuanced stuff, hopefully you learn something new, of course, but we are also doing a presentation for parents, students, and families tonight. It's the exact same presentation essentially, but we'll just be a little bit slower. We'll expand on things a little bit more, with the assumption that, again, I think we can assume with a fair amount of confidence that a lot of these parents and students and families are hearing this for the first time, and we just got to take it a little bit slower, right?
Yeah, we'll get into a little bit more detail. Oh, I was just about to put it. You beat me. Geez, I'm putting it in there, buddy. Okay, yeah, we'll go into more detail. You guys are learning around this, so we won't belabor stuff with you. But yeah, we'll be very deliberate and piece by piece with the parents tonight and the families.
Get us rolling, Peggy.
All right, here we go. All right. Yeah. So if you're unfamiliar with College Aid Pro, this is your first time. This is truly our mission. And the way we do this is by educating parents, students, you guys, all the players, right? And if we can all really understand this, it can really help families navigate this whole process so much easier with their kids. Okay, there we are. All right, so real quick, you guys know this stuff. When we're looking at award letters, there's four main things we're looking at: the need-based grants, the merit scholarships, sometimes they play around and call grant scholarships, work study, and then the loans. Those are the main things that we're looking at on these award letters. There's other stuff that we want them to have on there, but that's part of those are the offer pieces. So I just want to take a couple minutes to show you a few awards. I don't know how many awards all of you look at, if this is something that's a day-to-day in your job or not really. So we'll go through this with the parents tonight as well, but much more in depth. Here's an award letter from UC Davis from a couple years ago. So they're good about showing the cost of attendance in the breakdown. And then they say, hey, this is what you can afford through the through the FAFSA. So the total EFC here for this family, about 36,000. So they have need of about 23,000. So decent amount of need. And then they go through, and in this case, it's all loans. It's a parent loan, and then it's the federal direct loans, the sub and unsub loans. And then at the end, they say, here's your total award. It's a little, most people wouldn't call $56,000 of loans an award, but that's what this school is doing. So example of kind of not a great award. And then we hop over here to DU. They're doing a great job of breaking out. I'm sure you've seen some awards that don't even have the cost of attendance on it, but they did a good job of breaking out the direct and indirect costs, because that's a good nuance to share with families, because obviously the indirect costs have some flexibility in them. And then they break out the grant aid, the free stuff, right? The merit scholarship, the need-based grant. And we really focus with families, like, you've got to understand if something's need or merit, because as you guys know, merit's almost always good for 4 years, and need can change based on the family, so that they understand over 4 years what this might look like. And then, of course, there's the loans laid out nicely. And then they do a good job here of, here's your cost without loans, which is really the cost that matters, and then with loans. And then this slide, if you guys have seen this, if you haven't, this is a nice thing to understand, but we show this because Oxy on this award actually puts in one of their own loans. And in my experience, these loans tend to be pretty good. When the parents get into the weeds on the specs on the loan, they're usually pretty competitive. They're not high interest loans. They're really trying to add some help there. So that's what I point out here when we show this slide. And then I always ride home, or we do, that there's those parent loans. They're down at the bottom here, not front and center, but that's always an option, and that's always on there. And it's just cautionary for them that if that's your funding strategy, to pretty much pay for the whole cost, obviously that's a bit of a red flag. So then the next question is, once they understand all these awards, and if you're helping them with this, then it's, did we get a fair award? And that's where we can really step in and help your families in a major way. So I'm going to let you take over here, Matt, and jump in. And don't forget, if you guys have questions, don't be shy. Pop them in the Q&A for sure.
Yeah, beautiful. So this is our form, right? And I think that, again, for me, when I'm talking to school counselors, like, the quickest way to articulate it is like somewhat comparable to the Naviance or SCORE, right? I know most of you are shifting or have shifted or thinking about shifting from Naviance to SCORE, but of financial aid and scholarships, right? So it's a self-service tool that parents can use, where they answer a few questions, and then right away they get dumped into their home dashboard, and they're able to say, okay, what are my EFCs? And most families don't know that there's a few different types of EFCs. It's not just what happens in the FAFSA, but more importantly, what are schools actually going to cost them, right? You could equate this to like an instant net price calculator for any college in the country. So I can pop any school in here and get a really good idea of what it's actually going to cost my family, and then see how does that fit into my budget, or does it fit into my budget like a Penn State here? And then of course, and the idea is for every pain point in the process, we want to provide a solution. So let's shop smart for colleges and then figure out if we can afford it. And then we're going to go look for private scholarships after we're done with trying to maximize scholarships from the colleges themselves. And then, of course, we got to complete the FAFSA and the CSS profile, and we have an on-demand line-by-line instructions here. That's also strategy too, right? So it's not just about here's what to put on this line. It could be here's what not to put. Make sure you're not including retirement on the CS profile, sorry, on the FAFSA. Make sure this is where your 529s go. Make sure this is how you value your home on the CS profile. But what we're here to talk about today is understanding financial aid award letters and then figuring out how do we go do better. And what we're really excited about this new technology because it allows families, just like Peg demonstrated many times over, it can be very confusing with the lack of, there's not a uniform way of looking at these things and comparing side by side. So we've solved for that, right? So families can upload their award letter, they can translate it. Sometimes this takes a second when I'm sharing my screen here, but we're fortunate enough to hook up with a branch of the Gates Foundation that shares the same mission that we do. That's trying to make this whole process more transparent, right? And how these offers, how these award letters are actually provided to families, I think fits squarely in the middle of this lack of transparency type of deal here, right? Again, families usually don't know that they're signing up for a terrible offer because most of it includes a plus loan or whatever it happens to be. I might stop sharing here, guys, because I've never seen it take this long, to be honest. Give me just 1 second.
Yeah, this is a little bit longer than usual.
And we'll see if that does the trick. And it did. Okay.
It's funny how like 45 seconds is an eternity to us now because everything happens so quickly.
But as you can see, it allows, again, us to say, okay, here's the sticker price or cost of attendance, but this is what you're getting in need-based grants versus merit-based scholarships. We're backing out work study, we're backing out plus loans, and then we can decide if they want to take some or all of the federal direct student loan. But ultimately, what are you going to be left to pay for out of pocket? And allows these families, again, to just compare apples to apples at however many schools they've been accepted to and received financial aid award letters from. And taking it one step further, what I think is the most exciting, arguably one of the most exciting parts of our platform, is essentially being able to tell you, did you get a good deal? What is the likelihood of going back to this particular institution and appealing for additional financial aid and or scholarships? And there's a lot of layers, as you would expect, baked into the algorithm here, but we're incredibly confident with the output. And if we want to get some more context here, like why do we think we have a great shot for getting a few more bucks at BU? Number one, what they were actually awarded was about $15,000 less than BU's net price calculator said they were going to get. And our net price calculator said they were going to get. So something is not adding up there. And it's not uncommon at all for colleges to under award families, right? Because as consumers, how are we supposed to know, essentially, if we got a good deal? So we love playing the watchdog in this sense. And there's some other reasons too that, again, for this family, it makes sense to appeal at BU. The institution's methodology. BU uses something called the institutional methodology, is the name of the methodology that they use, essentially their business model. By nature of that business model, schools that use it, there's generally more, the term we use loosely here is wiggle room. And if a school is, a school in my backyard here, Endicott, is a private school that uses the federal methodology. That oftentimes gives us a hint that we could have decent odds for appealing successfully. And then another one here is there's family considerations. Okay, this particular family is a divorce two household family. We know that oftentimes can be one of the factors leading to having successful appeal. So I think a lot of times, especially for where you all sit as school counselors, it can be hard to tell or advise families like, did you get a good deal? Because you're not able to look at their FAFSA, I don't think. In most cases, look at their FAFSA, their EFCs, their tax returns. So it's hard to say, did you get at least a good need-based deal? You probably have some pretty decent insight into terms of merit-based scholarships of, hey, based on what I know historically of this school, based on what I know of this student's credentials, this makes sense or doesn't make sense in terms of their merit-based award. But I think especially for that need component, I would imagine that's a hard thing for you all to weigh in on. So that's why we're really excited to have a resource to hold these colleges accountable a little bit.
All right, let's get back into here. I don't know why that moved around. All right, so now that we've covered, they can see is what are the grounds for appeal? Should we always appeal? So let's talk about what are good candidates for appeal versus bad. So as Matt just talked about a little bit, private schools, if you're a betting person, are always going to be a better play for appealing versus public schools. And on the right here, we got the state and public colleges. Typically, and I've got some parents right now that are doing it. I'm like, go ahead. This is how I would do it, but I'm not optimistic if you want to take the time to do it. It's usually not going to be fruitful, or it might be a little, if you're lucky, and little, $1,000 here or there at state and public colleges, unless you have a change in circumstance. If a family ever says, hey, there's senior family, 2021 was just a terrible year. I was out of work or this or that. No, sorry, was a great year. And now I'm out of work. If the current reality or the tax year before was worse than the year they reported on, that's always a trigger that they should start doing some digging about what that means numbers wise and should they appeal. And that's true at state schools or private schools. But in general, all things being relatively the same on the financial front from when they reported on the forms, private colleges are going to be a better bet. This COVID impact, this is leading into what I was just talking about. COVID hit a lot of people hard, right? And that was crummy. Maybe that can turn into a little bit of a silver lining that they might be able to get some more money if they still have some negative effects from COVID in some way. Thing that was like a one-off anomaly, retirement distributions, big capital gains distributions, where people just didn't realize, hey, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. This is a year that matters on financial aid. Then their child's sophomore year in high school, they could do things. It's the last thing on their mind about financial aid and how that even works. If there's anything like that's a trigger that they should definitely be appealing. And then if families are divorced or separated or remarried, a lot of planning opportunities there, a lot of room for some families for appeal. And then Matt talked about Endicott that follows the FM, the federal methodology, but there's some key differences between the institutional methodology, which is the CS profile schools, versus the FAFSA only schools federal methodology. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And then the last group is business owners. Business owners, and this is going to, with the FAFSA Simplification Act, businesses are going to be on the table. Some people's businesses and their values are going to be on the table for the FAFSA. Starting when that gets implemented. Now it's just the CS profile, but there are some opportunities there. The colleges request the 1120S, which is an S Corp return, and they do deep dives in there, throw out expenses. I'm just trying to plant the seed that for business owners, that should be a thing they might want to consider appealing as well. And then of course, on the merit side, if you've got schools that are competing, and you guys know these schools, right? This is your expertise around schools. Parents always ask us, how do I know if it's a competing school? You guys know that if they've got competing offers, that's great grounds for appealing for merit especially. And we've been really successful helping families with that. All right, you guys are going to get these slides. So we don't have to go through each one of these. These are just some tips to assess chances. And we'll go through this with the parents. And then one more kind of guidepost. I want to hit on the first one and the last one, especially early decision kids are past now, but just for upcoming year, having them understand, and I'm sure you guys get into detail on this big time because you're signing off on these ED kids, of them just understanding ED is a wonderful thing in certain ways, but when it comes to financial aid, you lose a little bit of leverage. And just for them to understand, as it says here, the implications and the limitations, but you can absolutely appeal ED. I've helped a few families through the years where it didn't take me long to realize that they really under awarded for need. And it was easy for me to see that and to reach back out and in a very full way, point it out. And then more grant aid came. Sometimes on the merit side, it'll work too. So it's not, hey, we just have to take what we get on ED. And then the other piece about appealing is depending on what the family is appealing for, it's going to be different departments. So merit, as you guys know, comes from the Office of Admissions. So you're going to want to appeal to Office of Admissions, any need-based aid. They're going to want to be appealing to financial aid. And sometimes people think, and I get it, hey, it's all about the money, so it's all financial aid. And actually it isn't, because financial aid won't be able to address a merit appeal. So that's best to go to the Office of Admissions. Okay, you want to take over here, Matt? I know.
And the other thing I'll layer on there is that we have seen, specifically in the last couple of years, right, 5+ years ago, the fact that this whole thing was even a thing was a fairly kept secret, right? I think it's now, certainly all of you school counselors know this is here. I think just with how knowable information is in general, you have more consumers that know that. Now, I will tell you, every presentation we do around this, we'll still get plenty of families that will say, I never even would have thought of this. I just thought it was take it or leave it. And that's the deal. And I never even thought of it in the context of any other major investment, buying a car, home, whatever, and potentially pushing back and doing better than the initial offer. But I'll skip to this last bullet point here because it's relevant and ties into the last point that Peg said here. But if we are appealing for more merit-based aid, okay, and that's merit-based scholarships, and that's happening through the admissions office, which it should, the student should be the loudest voice in the room there, right? We've seen evidence that shows that's maximizing our odds of having more success. The admissions, they don't really care about what's going on financially in that household. They're invested in the student. I have identified them as a great fit for their campus, and that's who they want to hear from, especially if the student has had some type of rapport, even if it was just they met them at the college fair, at the high school, or whatever. They want to hone in on a particular individual. If they don't have that, they want to be proactive and figure out who their counselor is. In most cases, it's based on geographically, it's based on the region where you live. That's how you're assigned a particular counselor. And so the student will want to do that with the parents in more of a supporting role. Whereas if it's a need-based financial aid argument that's happening with the financial aid office, in most cases, it makes sense for the parent to be, again, the loudest voice there, or the one that's talking more technically, right? Where, hey, we had the spike in income. Hey, we had a one-time distribution from our 401k. Hey, we had a rollover. Hey, we had a business loss. It makes sense for the parents to be elaborating on those types of specifics, whereas again, in the student is more of in a supporting, providing color type of role. Okay. Now this slide right here, obviously very simple, pretty bare bones, but also I think pretty powerful. And this is constructed, and I'll unpack each of these, but the main architect of this slide is currently one of our teammates who's the director of financial aid at Harvard Medical School. He was at MIT before that, Boston College before that. His wife is a director of financial aid. He spent his whole career in financial aid, and he's worked with us for a long time. And he's an incredible wealth of knowledge, along with some of the other counselors on our team, to be able to give insight from that side of the fence to say, hey, here's how you want to come back and get some more money from our school and other schools. This is the right way to approach it. Again, we're very fortunate to have that. And as a matter of fact, these guys that I'm talking about and gals as well are some of the presenters. If any of you are looking for presenters to do our financial aid curriculum at your high school, you can have these folks that are from these pretty awesome institutions and get some additional insight that, again, I think Peggy and I know what we're talking about here, but they have that additional access. But the first thing that Ryan always reminds us of, and he is not a touchy-feely guy, if there's such a thing as the opposite, very nice guy, but not a touchy-feely guy. Bring color to this story, right? The financial aid counselor only sees the black and white numbers. They only see the FAFSA, the CS profile. It's their job to make this thing a profitable operation at their institution. They don't know that the best day of your family's life was when your kid got accepted, and the worst day was 2 weeks later when they got their offer. When they do know that, it makes it harder not to want to go to bat for you. And you want to do the homework for them. You want to say, Ryan, we crunch the numbers on our end. If you guys can come up with another $9,000, it's still going to be brutal, but we'll figure out a way to make it happen, right? We want to spoon feed these folks. Peg talked a lot about showing competing offers. This is the time that we do it. Even though you guys are our first choice, I'm looking at these other options that are $10,000, $20,000 more affordable. I'm not asking you to meet that dollar for dollar, but if we can at least close the gap, it's going to make the decision easy on us. This fourth one here, I always call this kind of bullet point, like the PhD level part of appealing. That, again, I think, at least in my experience, is most school counselors don't necessarily know this or don't have a ton of experience with it. And it was news to me as of a couple of years ago, but specifically, a lot of these private colleges that require tax returns, all schedules, all business returns from everybody. I think the thought process was that, hey, they want to validate what we put on the FAFSA and the CS profile. That's really not why they want those forms. They want those because Ryan and Josh and Laura and all their colleagues, they're just going to go right to the deductions part of your tax return, and they're going to make some of their own interpretations. And they're going to say, you wrote off depreciation. We're not counting that. You wrote off this software that you use for your business. Maybe we'll give you half credit for that. So they make all these decisions, these write-offs that the IRS allowed, but they don't allow them at the college. And so they're going to say your EFC is higher, and therefore we're giving you less need-based financial aid. How in the world are you supposed to know that? You're not. I think it's very rare that folks know that. So families want to challenge them specifically on that. Hey, did you not include some of the write-offs that the IRS did allow, thereby giving my family a higher income, a higher EFC, and less need-based financial aid? Because I can tell you right now, that is great grounds and a high likelihood that you're able to have a successful appeal if you can appeal with that level of sophistication. And it matters. It's way more than just asking for more money. The level of sophistication is going to have a lot to do with whether or not you're successful in your appeal. Okay. Now, of course, we're always preaching persistence, and we got to update the slide here because we're demonstrating interest, and that matters to the school. That's an important part of the evaluation process and can even play a factor in money. But nobody's being a jerk here, right? The financial aid counselors that we work with always remind us that, hey, I am evaluating this family to say, is this somebody that I want to have a relationship with for the next 4 years, right? Are they going to make my job harder or easier? So we want to make sure that we're approaching it from this point of, hey, we're trying to figure out a way to make it happen for our kid. Anything you can do to help us. And hey, it's me again, a gentle nudge that we're checking in here, and maybe we're circling back for a second or third time or whatever, but it's always in a kind way, right? That's a quick way to get your appeal shut down if they decide that it's not someone they would like to have a relationship with. Okay. And I already hit on the fact of the last slide here in terms of the student leading the charge, specifically when it's merit-based scholarship. So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully there's a couple things that are new to you. Again, we're going to spend more time on the presentation tonight when we talk with parents, right? Again, if you want to invite anybody in any other parents that you think might benefit, we have the registration link and Zoom there, and feel free to share it. And I think you're up here, Peggy.
Yeah, just real quick, not just to show you guys, this is a case that we had earlier this year. I think it was an ED kid because it came in early with one of our college planning experts. So this was the award before appealing. So if you see here, the student got a nice merit award, had some need, got a grant. And then, so total gift aid of over 34,000. That's a nice chunk of the cost of attendance. This family, the guy's name is actually Matt. We call him Vern, our expert. He appealed based on their home equity. And a question came in and I answered it. That's a big one with the IM methodology because most of these schools look at home equity value minus any liabilities. Not all of them, but most of the CS profile schools look at that in some capacity. So that's an appeal piece. Hey, how did you value my home? So that's what he did. And when he went back and did this, they still got their merit. That wasn't affected. But look at that grant. That grant jumped tremendously. So it went from 34,000 to over 62,000. And we're not sitting here telling you this is typical. It is not. It's awesome. But just sending home the point, like reaching out can help. And I always tell parents, worst case, you spend a little time and you don't get anything. But most of the time, if there's a good appeal, if it's reaching out to a state school, like I said earlier, and saying, hey, I'm not ready to retire and you have to give me more, that's probably going to fall on deaf ears, or comparing to state schools. But if there are any grounds, it really can be fruitful. And if it's merit aid and they bump it $2,000, then that's an $8,000 additional discount in that family's pocket. That's, in my book, that's a lot of money. It can be a game changer.
Yeah, and just to pause on there for a second too, for this year specifically, and sorry, I got a request for it. Do we have a flyer for tonight? If you want, you can just email me direct, Maria, and we can get you a flyer and we have the Zoom presentation link in there, but we can get you some copy, a template of copy to send in the email, obviously doctored up however you want, and a flyer to include for your parents. So just email me that and I will get you that in return. So a couple of things here. I think that home equity piece is especially important this year because we've seen that more so than ever be a great thing to push back on this year. Number one, college, that is a little bit of a dirty secret where they know they shouldn't be holding home equity against families, but so many of them do. So they don't like to be called on it, number one, but especially this year, in addition to challenging the value of the home and how arbitrary that is, what Vern focused on as well here in this case, and we've been doing with a lot of consistency across the board, is to say, we get it. There was a time in the not too distant past here where if we were homeowners, we could access our equity at these incredibly competitive rates, way better than these traditional educational loans type of deal. That's a thing of the past right now. So that is something else we've been pushing back on, is like, hey, you're holding our home against us, saying we can borrow against it, but we're going to have to borrow whatever percent right now, which is, I haven't looked in a couple of weeks, I guess, here, but it's not pretty. I do know that. Again, just another talking point, and that is, again, the more sophisticated we are with our appeal, the higher our odds are, because these colleges don't like the general public to know how they do business. So that is where it's more common that for them to be like, geez, let's just give these guys a couple bucks and make them feel super happy and not put us on blast a little bit here. That's a real thing. So if you want, you can probably show that last slide, Peg, and show my.
Yeah, and I just put your
my link. So
I just put your link in the chat again.
And a couple of things that we can talk about. Again, we partner with about 300 high schools across the country. Our main thing that we do is provide education, provide a curriculum. This is one, actually, and I'll share for a second, Peg. This is just one kind of preview into kind of our series of presentations that we do for families, so you can get a rough idea of the outline. It's not a one size fits all. This is our boilerplate template. Some schools will have us do all of these presentations and more. Some schools will just cherry pick one or two, but it's completely free. We don't charge for these. And then, so if that's something that you want to explore, please book a time with me. We'll talk about that. I always say the first thing that you should do is talk to other schools that work with us. get get the dirt on us, right? Obviously, we're not in there talking about what we do as a company or anything like that, or selling our software or anything like that. We're educating folks. And the other thing, as I mentioned, I know a couple of you were late, but a couple other ways that I would encourage you to book a meeting if you're somebody that we work with a lot of school counselors that we're a side hustle of sorts for them, right? We're always looking for content. If you're a great writer and obviously you're well versed in this admissions piece of the puzzle that is not our expertise, we would love to put you to work there. I think we're very generous. If you're a school counselor that is allowed to work with students privately outside of college, again, we get a ton of inbound requests for that. It is not our sweet spot. So we like to partner with school counselors that like to do that, that can do that, etc. Please book a time to talk about that. And then again, for those of you that check out our newsletters that go out every other week, typically not everyone, but we'll do a featured counselor. So if you're interested in being a featured counselor, we'd love to do it. Just a quick little informal interview. And I think that's been beneficial for your peers to learn what's working for you, what's not working for you, what have you learned, what would you do differently. I think that's been a cool little thing. And we also try to love you up on social and stuff like that, maybe get you some notoriety or whatever we can do to help you in exchange for you kind of lending your expertise and some time. Please do it. So any number of reasons you want, book a couple minutes with me and we'll get to know each other a little bit and learn how we can help you. But yeah, and again, make sure that you share that link for tonight's presentation with your families. I think we do a great job specifically with this presentation. We go a lot slower. We don't assume that everybody knows the difference between a merit-based scholarship and a need-based grant and work study and all that, but we didn't want to put you guys to sleep. Peggy, anything else that you want to add?
No, I think we're good, and had a few questions that we've answered. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful to you guys. You got a tidbit of something around this whole appeals process that was helpful. If you go deep with this with your families or you don't, hopefully there was something there that we have supported you.
The other thing that I just want to flag that we're always, and also we have a dedicated email for you guys. I'm putting in there as well, counselor@collegeaidpro.com. Just any questions that come in where you just, again, want to have a sounding board, that's our support desk, supported by those get forwarded to me specifically. And I try to be really timely and prioritize those. And I'm making a loose promise to get back to people within a half a day, right? Certainly within a business day, but I try to be so far I've been able to be really responsive to those. So make sure that you send any and all questions our way, whatever it is. And what is the other one that it's escaping me? Topics for us to talk about. A lot of times we're talking like in and around May, we'll start a lot of our focus will be on student loans, right? Now, when we know next year's rates and repayment terms, and we'll get you coached up on when do we recommend a PLUS loan versus Sallie Mae versus a state loan, and we'll go really deep there. But we are totally open to whatever topics are consistently coming up for you guys. And the nice thing that we have is if it's not a bullseye for our area of expertise, we probably have someone on our team or a phone call away to bring in other experts, which is nice to do too, I think, to get some other perspective. So please email those to us, however you want to do it. We got a great network of folks to bring in here. And thank you for the kind words. All right, Peggy. We got 16 minutes. I don't know what I'm going to do with my time, but I'm going to go have some fun.
Yeah. And we give you guys an extra 15 minutes to go take a break or get some other stuff done. So I know that's always good to have a little extra time.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a great
All right, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.